Hey there, welcome to the Mountain of God. My name is Camille. Today is the 11th of January 2023, and welcome to video number 54. Today I want to talk about the revelation and basically the fourth horseman of the apocalypse being the beginning of it, and how we're supposed to look at it to understand and have the kind of tools to understand what's going on during that period of the human history, I would say. So, when you look at every story, if you want to understand what's going on, there are five basic questions that you need to answer to have like a general view of this whole story. The five questions are who, what, how, when, and why. And if you look at the story of the revelation, everything becomes clear basically to answer most of those questions in the first 6 chapters. So when we look at the chronology of the revelation of those 6 chapters, what you see is that the first chapter is basically an intro, plus the information that this is vision and that Jesus is talking to John and so on. Chapter 2 and 3 are letters to the churches. Chapter 4 is a vision of heaven. Chapter 5 is a vision of the Lamb of God. And chapter 6 is basically 7 seals, or at least the beginning of it. So when you look at those 5 questions, everything becomes clear very shortly, very quickly, because first of all, if you ask, okay, so who is the main character of this whole story? And we can see from chapter 5 that Lamb of God, basically Yeshua, is the main hero of this story. That everything will happen and will concentrate on him. So that's clear. Number 2, what? And if the revelation is basically the wrapping of the story of humanity. That's how I look at it. And to make it all even easier, when you look at the whole Bible, it explains itself. Because if you look at where it all started, which is basically the Garden of Eden, the whole story is basically saying that this is how it was created. The reason for that it was created like this was because God wanted us to have a perfect environment to live and be in, and on top of that, He was there, spending time with us. When we decided we're gonna change this whole thing by eating the fruit and basically being kicked out of the garden, God said that the whole human history will 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 be to let Him get us back to the beginning. Basically, to put us in Eden, but in version 2.0, which is the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven. So this whole story is basically to put us back in this best environment ever with Him amongst us so we could just enjoy life. That's the whole story of the Bible, basically. So that's the second question, what? The wrapping up the story of humanity. Point number 3 is how. And we're going to talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse as a starting point of the revelation to give us some kind of clue how we're supposed to look at it and read from the beginning of the chapter 6 until the end to understand how to basically get this whole story and put it in our perspective, our lives today. Because in general, when we read Revelation, it sounds vague, it sounds like mystic or some abstract story. So we're going to talk about it, so I'm going to skip that one. Number 4, when. I'm not going to concentrate on that, but when we look at what's happening and how the question how going to tell us a lot by basically comparing it to what's happening today will tell us a lot about when it's going to happen, because it's going to be like a fig tree test. Because the more you see what's written happening in your own life, it will tell you a lot about timing. That's kind of self-explanatory, I would say. And question number 5, which is why, I talked about the first kind of the more spiritual side of things, and at least how I say it in the video number 14, which you can watch, which is titled "What Kind of Interdimensional Game of Chess We Are Pulled Into, Really." I talked about how I see this whole thing and what is the story behind the story from a spiritual perspective, at least from my understanding. And I plan to record another video which will talk about what's happening in our times that would suggest why this thing will happen rather sooner than later. But that being said, the chapter 6 starts with basically, let me see, 6 verses where, excuse me, 8 verses where all the horses of the horsemen of the apocalypse are explained or talked about. So the fascinating thing, at least for me, is that when you see the revelation and its chapters, it's like the intro, the letters, then the vision of heaven, meaning this is the place where it's all going to start. Then you've got the vision of the hero of the story, which is Lamb of God, and then you've got seals. So everything starts with this. This the beginning basically of the revelation. So we've got the white horse, which is seal number 1. This is Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, and we read there that. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of a thunder, one of those 4 beasts saying, "Come and see." And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and the crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Second seal, verses 3 and 4. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." And they went out another horse that was red, and the power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. Seal number 3, verses 5 and 6. And when he opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard the voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see thou art know the oil and the wine." Seal number 4, which are verses 7 and 8. And when he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And now there are 2 perspectives that we need to understand to even comprehend how do we supposed to understand this, or why it seems vague, and how we're supposed to connect it to what's happening in our times, in our lives. First of all, something that I kind of underlined a few times already, but it explains a lot, at least for me, that the vision that this prophecy was basically written is from the angle, from the position of being in heaven. That's why chapter 4, right, talked about heaven as a place where all of this is happening. So that's why we've got the chapter 4. And the another thing is that the hero of this whole story is Jesus. So the first thing you need to understand that's why it seems vague and mystic when you read the Revelation, because it's written from a perspective of heaven, from a perspective of angels, from a perspective of Jesus opening the seals and allowing this whole story to play out. But if you understand what is the spiritual rule here, that everything that happens in heaven will happen on earth, and many things that happen on earth will have impact or will make things happen in heaven, that's why it starts there, because God is saying, angel this, trump that, or something happens there, and then it will kind of play out on earth. So that's why I'm saying, understand that the perspective of this whole story was written from the perspective of heaven and being there. And second thing that we need to understand is the perspective. How is that going to play out on earth? And to understand that, you need to understand the basic rule, which you can see if you read the Bible from the beginning to the end, that the huge majority of judgment that God allows or brings to his people or the world in general is done by other people. And you can look at this in many many places in the Bible. And I've got tons of text, and I really want to jump because last time when I tried to record it, it took me like 45 minutes, and I really don't want to do this. So in Chronicles 2:36, when God's talking about what happened to the first temple, he says that Zedekiah was 21 and he became king, and he did evil in the eyes of the Lord and did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet. And he was doing bad things, and God sent messengers and Jeremiah and so on. He did not do anything. So basically what God did, you can read in verse 17, he brought up against them the king of the Babylonians, who killed their young men with the sword in the sanctuary, and did not spare young men or young women, or elderly or infirm. And you can read that the Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, basically took Israel into and occupied them. He took them to Babylon, and you can read in verse 21, the land enjoyed its Sabbath rests. All the time of its desolation is rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. And Jeremiah basically says the same thing, for they have not listened to my words, declared the Lord's word that I sent to them again and again by my servants and prophets. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, he'll put them to death before your very eyes. That's Jeremiah 29, and that's verse 19 or 21 now. I will deliver them unto the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He will put them to death before your very eyes. And 22, all the exiles from Judah who are in Babylon will use this curse. May the Lord treat you like a Zedekiah and Ahab, whom the king of Babylon burned in fire. He's using a king of Babylon. And we know that from history that the Solomon's temple, which is the first temple, was destroyed during the siege of Jerusalem by the king Nebuchadnezzar II of Neo-Babylonian Empire in 587 BC. The same things happened from Second Temple, when Romans occupied Israel, and what Israel did, killed their own Messiah, even though they knew that he was sent from God. Because when you read about Nicodemus, who's coming to talk to Jesus in John 3:2, you read that we knew that thou art a teacher come from God. That's King James version is crazy. For no man can do these miracles that thou does except God be with him. Meaning, we know that nobody is able to do things that you do if he's not from God. So they knew, and they killed him anyway. So look what Jesus say about the temple in Luke 21:5. Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. Destruction of Second Temple, Romans siege of Jerusalem in the year 70. Again, he used Romans to destroy and send judgment on the Israel. And if you read Old Testament, New Testament, it happens over and over. If you read Judges, this is beautiful. It's like few verses on every judge, and you can see the Israelis did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, so that he sold them to king of Aram. But they cried to the Lord, so he raised up for them deliverer Othniel, son of Ketnas, Caleb's younger brother, who saved them. And every judge is basically the same thing. They did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He basically destroyed them using some other king or kingdom. They asked for help, and God raised them a judge who delivered them from it. And it happens through all judges. And you got Gideon, Deborah, Samson, all of this happen saying the same story. That the judgment comes through other people and salvation comes through other people. And interestingly enough, through the whole Bible, you can read about prophets, Elijah and Baal, priests on the Mount of Carmel, Elisha, Jezebel in 2 Kings. Even when you jump to the New Testament, you've got apostles and the story of Ananias and Sapphira, right? Acts chapter number 5. they died because there was judgment. And the whole Acts basically, and everything that happens there are miracles and signs. And it says in Acts 5, 12 and 13, and by the hands of the apostles were many signs and wonders wrought among the people, and they were all with one accord in Solomon's porch. And of the rest durst no man join himself to them, but the people magnified them. Meaning people out from outside were afraid, but they kind of respected the church because of what was happening there. And the same thing comes from Moses and Aaron, basically, who are brought judgment on Egypt. The same thing will happen with the two witnesses in the Revelation, right? Going back to the foreshadowing story, right? So in most of the cases, judgment comes using other people. God doesn't have to make something miracle, something magical that will happen. That will be judgment. No, He'll use and He'll just, as a rule, He says, everything's fine, I'm going to bless you. But if not, I'm going to just raise my hands and allow things to happen. And then bad things happen. And in most of the cases, it happens to other people. There are few cases that we can see, like plague number 10 in Egypt, right? Death of the first son done by the angel. It was brought up by the word of the Moses, but it happened by the angel basically did the killing, right? The same thing with angels and Assyrians in 2 King 19, when 185,000 of Assyrians were killed by the angel. But most of the cases there are people. And so that's why when you read the first horsemen of the apocalypse, which are basically the beginning of everything, I want you to read it. Okay, so what does it mean if the judgment will come from other people? Not from something magical happening, but God will use other people and allow them to bring judgment. So when you read the first horseman, or first horse, which is the white one, most of the biblical scholars agree to this one and the rest of them as well, that this is the Antichrist. And in general, it's not only the Antichrist as a person, but also the global government of Lucifer, which the main character will be the Antichrist. And you've got to understand, if that's true, that will happen, you've got to understand a few major things that are happening or will have to happen right now if we are in the end times. That the preparations are done for decades. He's not just going to jump out and say, "Listen, here I am." The preparations have to be there. You've got to understand that he'll be accepted by all religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. How long it's going to take you to kind of sell this thing to the top heads of those religions, unless they're all already in the club. So, and then acceptance and the prize from all the nations. People will accept them, and people will love them. So what do you have to do, and what will have to happen in this world, that everyone, no matter if they're religious or not, they're atheists or they're Islamic faith or Christians or Jew, or what you have to do, what will have to happen, so these people will accept them. And this is the horse number 2, which is interesting that it happens one after another. The red horse, which is war. And first of all, you need to understand, and this is something that you might want to do a little bit of digging, that every war, at least since Napoleonic Wars, that happened was because someone had something to they tried to play or trying to gain something from it. All of those wars were planned. Nothing happened out of nowhere. We just woke up in the morning, they start, oh, let's start a war. And people are bad, but not that bad. Trust me, there are historical evidence that every war, especially the First War, Second World War, and so on, all of this was done because someone had a business in those wars happening. And interestingly enough, if you look at the conspiracy, which is conspiracy because someone is hiding the data, at least from my perspective, there's a letter from Albert Pike, letter to Mazzini, that was supposedly written in August 15, 1871, when 33 the Green Mason, Albert Pike, one of the most famous person in this whole occult system, wrote a letter talking about 3 world wars that will have to happen to bring the Lucifer to power. He wrote that the First World War will overthrow the power of czars in Russia and making this country a fortress of ethics communism. And it was written in 1871, so 40 something years before the First World War. About Second World War, he wrote, this war must brought about the Nazism and to destroy the Nazism, but to make it so the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. International communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. Interesting enough, it works exactly as it was written. And obviously, the United Nations become as a kind of testing ground for the kind of global system of governance, right? That's exactly after the World War II. But interestingly enough, what he's writing about the Third World War, he's writing that it'll be between the political Zionists and the leaders of Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism, which is State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, economical exhaustion. And it'll basically say that they will use atheism and all this turmoil to basically exterminate everyone who's going to go against inclusion, these delusions. People of being these delusions with Christianity would basically would not work in that time. So, and this is what he writes at the end. So people will look for idea or something that they will render their adoration to, kind of, as a getting out of this war. And he'll say, we will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into the public view. That's what they're going to sell as a solution. And he says that this manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. So it's all planned. So it makes sense that they're going to use war to bring the religion of the Lucifer and the government of Lucifer and the Antichrist itself by Third World War. And interestingly enough, we go further and say, okay, there's a famine and poverty, which is basically the black horse, the horse number 3. And if you look what's happening right now, when you look at the consequences of Russia and Ukraine war, which is basically, for so many months right now, the result for the at least Western world is basically fuel prices, inflation in energy and food, and the long-term issues that we will have that we don't see it yet. Because if you look at the fuel, you can see that there's issues with diesel in US. There's a whole story about pipelines, natural gas pipelines in Russia, and how Europe is basically going against Russia at the same time asking them for gas to be able to survive the winter. It's crazy. You can read about OPEC moving from the Western countries and shaking heads with the BRICS and cutting the oil production. You can read about the breadbasket of the world, which is basically Ukraine and a little part of Russia, which there's war there. How do you think it's going to impact the price of food? And something that not many people say or understand, that fertilizers, which are mostly chemical, not the natural ones used in agriculture, most of the import of that is done by Russia and Belarus. But the Western world is in war with them right now. So how do you think it's going to have impact on the long term on food? You understand? We are just in the beginning of this famine and poverty, which will basically result in this whole thing. And in the Western world, we don't really feel it yet. But look what's going on in the Third World War, or third world countries like Sri Lanka. It's bad right now. And then if you go to Pale Horse, which is basically like a combination or summary of all of them, it says about government oppression, and there are tons of subjects that you want to look at, like China and its credit score, face recognition software, the full control over the population of China. You want to read about CBDC and cryptocurrency, which is basically going to create a cashless society, and basically everything's going to be used with the programmable money. That's what you'll get, and you will be able to buy or sell if someone will allow you to. But if they're going to use the green agenda and say, you bought too much tickets or bought too much gasoline, they'll tell you, no, you're not going to be able to buy it because we do not allow you to. Full control. You want to read about DNA, mRNA, impact of this jabs and so on, how that impacts, and hold the thing about mark of the beast. If it's going to come from a human, it changes the perspective, how you're supposed to look and understand what you're supposed to see what's happening and how you're supposed to understand it, because you can understand that they're going to lie about most of it. And the Pale Horse talked about war. We talked about it. He talks about hunger and famine, and he talked about infectious diseases. And you see, that's something that's not really there in the text, but in context of the whole Revelation, basically Bible scholars are agreeing that we can look at death, which is named there, as infectious diseases as well. And then the whole thing about medicine as a business. No, not healing people, just masking symptoms just to make money on you, so we'll have to buy their products over and over again. All those things, you're supposed to look at it and understand that it might be a part of the plan. Event 201, event which is called catastrophic contagion, if you want to look at something. You can look at Conplan 8888, which is basically U.S. Department of Defense Strategic Command document that describes a plan for the nation and its military defending against any zombies. 2011. It became known right now because some people say that military is trained right now to be ready for a zombie apocalypse. Crazy stuff. But if you understand that the judgment will come from people, it might be good to look at it, to understand. So you see, this is what I want you to take from this video. If you understand that God uses other people for judgment, it might change how you're supposed to look at things that are happening right now in the world. And second, if you understand that there is a malevolent intent, and if we see what's written, the judgment will come from people who serve Lucifer and try to bring Lucifer to the, and give this whole planet and people on it to him, there will be a malevolent intent. So if you put these two together, I want you to understand that it's very important to see what the government is doing, because it might be against you. I want you to observe and see what's coming, and understand that things like mark of the beast are not going to just fall from the sky. It might be disguised as something else, and the things that are happening right now might be the part of it. Maybe it's not that exactly, but it might be a prelude. It might be something that kind of programs you to get the mark itself and not even think about it, because you're basically programmed to believe that everything that your government is doing is fine, is good for you. You don't understand what I'm saying? And one additional thing I would say, go to your father and talk to him. Because if you're here right now in this time, it means that you're called to be here. It means that you're prepared and equipped to withstand all of this. And there's a calling for you to do something during that time, before everything, until we're here, there's something to be done. So I want you to kind of really pay attention and talk to your father to understand what is your role and to play it well. So think about it and do something about it, because it looks like the time is close, and it's so important to understand why we're here, to understand that if judgment is come from other people, or other people will be used to judge, we need to be smart. If you like this video, like, share, comment. If you didn't, comment as well, or tell me what you think. And if there's anything you want me to talk about, just give me a shout. I'll be glad to talk about it for you. And that being said, see you in the next video.